A quick thank you to the T5 peeps. Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, Dark Machine, Try Again 95, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Budic Joel, Germanchemist, Casper Arnholtz, and Chaos to Must. Thank you very much. The Meaning of Winning, written by wolf-21342. The Imperial High Court Chamber of the Uthrati Empire. A conference on the proposed expansionism of the trade war with the Terran Alliance rages on. The many perceived slights, the encroachment into their empire space of the colonists settling on any planet in range, and the open disregard for the authority of the Imperial Court, as prescribed by the gods of old and new, has gone on for too long, and could not be ignored. In truth, the war had already been ongoing for a number of cycles as a series of small border conflicts. But such border skirmishes have been the fact of life for the Empire far longer than anyone wanted to mention. Thus, no attention was given to it, other than the dispatch of the elite 1st Defense Fleet in an attempt to quell the rabble-rousers and to show everyone that the Imperial authority was supreme. Show the flag, to use the old parlance. The shock we all received when the news came through that the fleet had been destroyed was not the worst one. No, that only came when the Terrans dispatched a messenger informing the Imperial Court that the elite ground forces the fleet was carrying were now prisoners of war, and that the Terrans expected the Empire forces to conduct themselves according to their Terran rules of war. All of this with nary a tribute or obeisance that were required when speaking to the Supreme Emperor of the Urathi Empire, the chosen of the gods, Lord over all that exists, Master of the galaxy and all of its inhabitants. The messenger was now sitting in a cell, waiting public execution, and the court was debating the response against his homeworld. The slight could not be forgiven, nor could it be forgotten, and Terrans were to learn that lesson. The High Admiral of the Uthrati Navy speaks. No experts have looked out to the so-called rules of war that the Terrans are insisting on. They are laughable. Places not to attack, symbols to obey, weapons not to use. Why would we ever agree to that? My colleague seems to forget that these primitives are holding our 1st Division hostage subject to our acceptance of these terms, said the High General of the Empire. Even with the losses our warriors took, that is more than 8,000 of sons and daughters of our most prominent military families, and their emissary brought a damned list of them. These families have significant standing of their own below the throne, and I have no doubt that they have also this list already. These warriors are as good as dead already, just like the ones that served my ships. Do you actually believe that they'll ever be returned to their families? Much as I hate to get between the various military branches, I had no choice but to step in. There is a good chance that they will, if we follow the Terran's rules. Yeah, the Chief Tavak is not a deaf-mute after all. The People's Speaker never misses a chance to score some points with the court. Intelligence work is despised as untouchable in the Empire. Thus I am here due to necessity, not because I'm actually wanted or respected, or even permitted to voice opinions really. So I tune them out for a while. Why do you grok think that they would return our warriors, As per the standing order of our Emperor, beloved by all, I have the duty to study all of our neighbors, and the Terran Alliance is no exception to that. And in fact, it has been a primary target of the investigation, due to a couple of interesting oddities in their physique and military capability. Why were we not warned that they can destroy our prime fleet then? The High Admiral and the High General shout in unison before the speaker manages to silence them. Funny that given neither him nor her sound anything alike normally, but I found it best not to dwell on such things. If my military colleagues would recall, the topic was broached in Session 322-42, and it has been dismissed as unlikely. Quote, end quote. You are welcome to consult the minutes of the session after we have finished here. In truth, both of them had laughed me out of the chamber, and I still have official reprimand from the throne in my personal file for sedation due to expression of public doubt in supremacy of Empire military over all others. So I'm trying very hard not to sound too smug. The question raised cuts to belief that humans will return our warriors if we follow their rules, and I have to stress that we would need to follow them, not just agree to follow and later ignore. Due to the nature of our work, we in the intelligence office have had to look at Terran history, and what we have found out is quite frankly horrifying. The rules they wrote are the result of thousands of cycles of conflicts, quite a few of them globe-spanning, especially in the last 400 cycles before they reached space. I can't avoid a bit of sarcasm in my next words. My colleagues in our military forces seem quite oblivious to the fact that the Terrans are only sapient species we know of that have used chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons against their own people before they even left their own planet. They know exactly what these weapons can do. They know exactly what the policy of not taking prisoner causes. They know what happens when you war against a whole population of the state. And they have restricted themselves only after testing these methods on themselves. There is a catch in this, however. They only obey those rules against others who follow the same rules. What their emissary has said, rude as it was, should be interpreted as a threat. Don't make us resort to this barbarity, for we are fully capable of carrying it all out. And you are not. Some of the councillors had gone pale at this point. The speaker finally found his voice, though, and asked what I know must have been a hard question to ask, given that his son was one of the 8,000 prisoners. He is not without some degree of personal courage, but politically he still is a bootlicker, and his rank is barely higher than mine is. But if we were to consider our prisoners dead, disregard the Terran rules, escalate and attack Terra itself, can we wipe the shame of defeat and conquer them? I thought for a moment. No! That had a whole chamber in uproar. I waited a short while for it to die down, and ultimately the speaker managed to bring some semblance of order to the proceeding. Please let me finish. It's not that our military can't fight them. It certainly can, though losses must be expected, and they will be considerable. It is not that they are not vulnerable to attack. In fact, this system is not as fortified as any of ours would be in their situation. None of that matters. We have learned from multiple sources they almost certainly have weapons that are intended to wipe the life out of a whole planet, which they will use if the need arises, and to keep it dead for hundreds of cycles afterwards. And you are certain that these doomsday weapons are pointed at us? Don't you think we learned about their existence a little too easily? If I had devices like that, I'd hide them until I could use them to win the war, asked one of the junior naval admirals, with doubt clearly presented in his voice. I silently commended him for being a bit smarter than his boss. Our agents have investigated using all available assets, and the conclusion is this. They actually want anyone belligerent towards them to know that a system like that exists, as a deterrent. To quote one of the assets, it's not much of a doomsday device if you don't tell the world about it. You see, the purpose of these weapons is not to win a war. Their sole purpose is to ensure that we don't win it either. I eyed the whole council, mulling over the next words in my head, as my future and the future of my whole empire depended on that everyone here actually understood the danger. My emperor, the honorable lords of the council, we are certainly capable of overwhelming their defenses with our military force, but that is not sufficient to win against him. To win against them means to sacrifice our own most populated worlds, including the very imperial homeworld that we are currently standing on. And nothing, not even killing all the Terrans, will stop that. To put it simply, if we win, we die with them." A shudder ran through the assembled officials. To win at these terms would be a loss of the Empire, and thus no different from defeat. The Emperor broke the silence for the first time after a long, long while. "What, then, do you propose, my servant?" "My beloved Emperor, what I propose is this. Release their emissary, unharmed, and expel him from the Empire with the strongest rebuke that we can muster. Include the suspended death sentence for crimes against the Empire should he ever return. It'll look good, and Terrans understand that kind of thing. We then issue a ceasefire order and switch from a trade war to an economic capture attempt. Their greed is their biggest weakness." Long silence followed, until finally the Emperor spoke again. "As much as the gods will hate it, as much as I personally hate it, it has to be done. Do it." I relax a little now that the decision is made. It is likely we'll avoid this crisis, though I am certain the Terrans will find a way to screw it up for all of us. The Section Chief of the Terran Alliance Special Documentation Office listened with rapt attention to the recording of the Imperial Court meeting, then looked up at his immediate superior. "Didn't I tell you that my counterpart in the Empire is a smart cookie? She does understand us quite well for an Imperial. It helps us they rarely listen to her." Yes, she did. "Do you think they'll actually do it? Ceasefire and open borders for trade?" "No, they'll do it, boss. To deny Imperial order straight out of the Emperor's mouth would be heresy. What they don't realize, though, is that leaves them open to economic capture as well. And we've had years to learn that game, too. If I'm not mistaken, she is the only one that realizes that at this point. They will learn, though. Oh, they will most certainly learn. And there is nothing that they can do about it." The Section Chief and his boss shared a quick, very, very toothy smile. It was a good day for the Terran Alliance. End of story.